Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a really fascinating psychological dive into the architecture of our own thoughts. Specifically, we're looking at a pretty incredible scientifically backed method for how we can actively regulate our own minds when things get, well, just totally overwhelming.
So, let's kick things off with the core issue. How do you stop overthinking? I mean, it's a universal pain point, right? Feeling completely trapped in those runaway, anxious, mental loops that just keep looping and looping. You try to tell yourself to calm down, you try to rationalize, but your brain just keeps spinning its wheels and generating stress.
Well, research points to a surprisingly simple premise. If you want to temporarily quiet your mind, try this. Think in another language. I know, it sounds almost too simple, kind of like a parlor trick, right? But cognitive science actually shows that intentionally switching your internal monologue over to a second language can profoundly disrupt those anxious spirals.
Okay, let's dive into this and look at the first mechanism at play, creating emotional distance.
To really understand why this mental shift works so well, we first have to look at the massive weight our native words carry. You see, your native language isn't just some basic tool for communication. It's inextricably connected to your earliest childhood memories, your most raw emotional experiences, social pressures, shame, fear, your whole fundamental identity. Because these connections are so deeply wired into your brain over a lifetime, when you think in your native tongue, the thoughts feel incredibly immediate, they're visceral, they're emotionally intense, and they just hit you right in the gut. Notice the stark contrast here. Look at how a single thought manifests depending on the language you use. In your native language, an anxious thought might hit you as, "Everything is falling apart." It's a catastrophic five-alarm fire. But when you force your brain to translate that exact same feeling into a second language, it often comes out feeling a bit more detached. It lands closer to, maybe I'm overreacting. Why? Because a second language forces your brain to process the information more slowly and more analytically. The emotional charge is literally weakened. You're reading the data rather than drowning in the feeling.
Moving on to mechanism 2, interrupting anxious loops.
It's not just about emotional distance, though. It's also about physically interrupting anxious loops within the brain. Overthinking thrives on these automatic loops. Your brain repeats familiar, negative narratives at lightning speed. What if I fail? What do people think of me? I messed everything up. It's fast, it's familiar, and it is completely automatic. It's basically an emotional highway with zero speed limits, and your brain is just on autopilot.
But here is where we intentionally hit the brakes. Second languages require a lot more cognitive effort. By simply forcing your brain to retrieve vocabulary and construct grammar in a non-native tongue, you demand a significant amount of active brain power. And because your brain's processing capacity is finite, this extra cognitive effort literally crowds out your mind's ability to sustain those runaway emotional spirals. To put it simply, your brain literally doesn't have the available bandwidth to spiral into a panic and properly conjugate verbs at the exact same time.
Now for the science. The foreign language effect. So, how do researchers actually formalize these incredible mechanisms in psychological science? It's officially called the foreign language effect. This is the recognized phenomenon where reasoning in a non-native language actively reduces emotional reactivity and promotes clear analytical thinking. This isn't just some anecdotal life hack we found on the internet. This is a highly documented cognitive framework showing exactly how our language choices dictate the emotional temperature of our brain.
There's just a stark neurological contrast between the two. On one side, we have your native language setting. It's faster, it's highly emotional, and it operates completely automatically. On the other side, the second language setting. It forces a slower pace, it's highly deliberate, and it leans heavily into the rational. It's quite literally like having a built-in switch to toggle between your reactive emotional brain and your logical, analytical brain.
Okay, let's look at the catch, the limits of language.
We absolutely need to make sure we understand the full picture here. Because as powerful as the foreign language effect is, it's not a magic cure-all, and it comes with some very real limitations that the research clearly points out. First and foremost, if you're experiencing severe anxiety, and I mean full-blown panic attacks, chronic stress, severe insomnia, or intense physical symptoms like a racing heart or sweating, simply changing the language in your head usually won't solve the core problem. In these situations, the nervous system itself is already severely activated. It's a profound physiological response. You can't just translate your way out of a hijacked nervous system.
There's also this secondary trap that some bilingual individuals fall into. You've got feeling the emotional pain on one hand and endless analysis on the other. Sometimes, people will use their native language to carry all that raw emotional pain, but then consciously use their second language to entirely intellectualize it. So instead of an emotional spiral, they get trapped in an analytical spiral, endlessly analyzing their attachment styles, their trauma, self-worth, boundaries, the whole shebang. The anxiety becomes much more logical sounding, but it isn't actually getting any smaller. They're just avoiding feeling the pain by overthinking it in another language.
Which brings us to our ultimate takeaway, the observer shift.
The absolutely crucial point is this. The real benefit of this entire technique isn't the foreign vocabulary itself. The true benefit is a profound psychological shift that the language creates. Think about a really heavy thought like, I'm a failure. When you have this thought in your native language, you are completely immersed in it. You are entirely identified with it. There's absolutely zero space between you and the thought. In that moment, you truly feel like you are the failure.
But look at what happens when you process that through the deliberate, slower lens of another language. It forces your brain to step back and translate the underlying concept. The result is a massive shift toward this. I notice that I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. The true magic of the foreign language effect is that precious distance it creates. That small linguistic shift significantly reduces the emotional intensity because it shifts you from being the victim completely immersed in a thought to simply being the observer, watching a thought pass by.
So here is the final and most important question for you. What automatic thoughts do you need to distance yourself from today? The next time your mind starts racing and those familiar emotional alarms start blaring, try hitting the cognitive brakes. Switch the language of your inner monologue. Use it to step back, observe the loop, and finally give your mind the quiet it deserves. Keep learning, keep experimenting, and use this tool to take back control of your inner narrative.